The gunshot echoed through the empty warehouse as Kang Min-suk rolled his wheelchair backward, watching the man crumple to his knees. Not dead. Min-suk never killed unless absolutely necessary. But the bullet in the man's shoulder would serve as a reminder about what happened to those who stole from him. He raised his hand, and his men dragged the screaming thief away. Blood pooled on the concrete floor. Min-suk felt nothing. This was Wednesday. He returned to his penthouse office as dawn broke over Hanul City, the skyline glittering with the lights of a metropolis that slept while he worked. His phone buzzed with reports. 3 shipments cleared customs. 2 rival factions requesting meetings. 1 politician requiring a discreet campaign contribution. Everything running like clockwork. Everything under his control. Everything empty. Min-suk rolled to the floor-to-ceiling windows and stared at his reflection. A man who controlled millions in underground trade. A man whose name made hardened criminals nervous. A man who hadn't felt genuinely happy in so long he'd forgotten what happiness tasted like. The accident that stole his legs had taken something else too. His ability to trust. His capacity for vulnerability. His belief that anyone could see past the wheelchair and the reputation to whatever person remained underneath. His phone rang. The woman he'd been seeing. More accurately, the woman who tolerated his company because he paid for everything and fear was an excellent motivator for affection. Her voice was bright, fake, apologetic. Family emergency. Had to cancel dinner. He ended the call mid-excuse. Another lie. They always lied. Some because they feared him. Others because they wanted something. None because they actually cared. He made a decision that surprised even himself. No meetings tonight. No territory disputes. No carefully orchestrated displays of power. Tonight he wanted to be nobody. Just a man, anonymous and unimportant, in a place where no one knew his name or what he did when the sun went down. His driver took him to a neighborhood he'd never visited. Small shops with handwritten signs. Families walking together. A café with fogged windows and the smell of fresh coffee. The kind of place where nobody carried guns or spoke in coded language about shipments and territories. Min-suk entered quietly, and the few patrons barely glanced up. Perfect. He rolled to a table by the window, ordered 2 coffees from habit, and watched the rain streak down the glass. The door chimed. A woman burst in, soaked through her thin jacket, pulling a small girl by the hand. The child had enormous eyes and tangled dark hair, her clothes clean but worn. The woman was fumbling with coins at the counter, counting them twice, her shoulders carrying the kind of tension Min-suk recognized immediately. The universal language of not having enough. Of being one emergency away from complete disaster. The barista quoted a price. The woman's face fell. She started apologizing, putting back one of the items, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The little girl tugged her sleeve, whispering something. The woman shook her head, voice low but firm. They couldn't afford it. Maybe next time. The child turned then, scanning the cafe, and her gaze landed directly on Min-suk. She stared with the unfiltered directness only children possess. He stared back, caught off guard. Most adults looked away when they met his eyes, intimidated by something they couldn't quite name. This child didn't. She studied him for a long moment, then tugged harder on her mother's sleeve. "Mama," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet space, "why does that man look so lonely?" The woman, Naomi, turned bright red. She immediately tried to shush her daughter, apologizing profusely in Min-suk's direction, attempting to drag the girl toward the exit. But Min-suk surprised himself by speaking, his voice gentler than it had been in months, maybe years. "She's very perceptive. Please, don't apologize. I have an extra coffee getting cold, and it seems a shame to waste it." Naomi hesitated, every maternal instinct probably screaming warnings about strangers. But something in his face, or perhaps her own bone-deep exhaustion, made her accept. She guided her daughter, Azura, to his table. They sat awkwardly, the child swinging her legs, the mother looking ready to bolt at the first wrong word. "I'm so sorry about that," Naomi said quietly, her hands wrapped around the warm cup he'd slid toward her. She says whatever comes to mind. No filter. It's refreshing, Minsuk replied honestly. Most people lie to me constantly. Your daughter's honesty is rare. Zara picked up a sugar packet, examining it with intense scientific focus. Are you lonely because you can't walk? My friend Jackson has a wheelchair too. He's not lonely. He has lots of friends at school. Zara. Naomi's horror was palpable, her face going even redder. But Minsuk laughed. The sound felt strange in his own throat, rusty from disuse. No, that's not why. I can't walk, but I can do many other things. I'm lonely because I forgot how to let people be kind to me. I built very tall walls. Zara nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her 7-year-old logic. Mama says when you're scared of getting hurt, you build walls to keep everyone out. But then you're safe and alone. Are your walls really, really tall? Minsuk met Naomi's eyes. She looked mortified but also sad, understanding passing between them like a shared secret. Very tall, he admitted. Taller than most buildings. That sounds exhausting, Zara said matter-of-factly. Mama's walls aren't as tall, but she gets tired from holding them up. Maybe you should make your walls shorter. Then people could climb over and visit you. They talked for 30 minutes. Naomi revealed, reluctantly, that she worked 3 jobs. Morning shifts at a daycare, where she barely made enough to cover Zara's tuition at an after-school program. Evening cleaning at office buildings downtown. Overnight weekend shifts at a 24-hour diner that smelled like grease and desperation. She slept maybe 4 hours a night. Zara attended a public school that Naomi clearly wished was better but couldn't afford alternatives for. Zara kept the conversation light with observations about everything from why rain made streets smell funny to whether whales got lonely in the ocean. She had a bright, curious mind trapped in circumstances that would likely limit her potential. Minsuk found himself smiling more in those 30 minutes than he had in months. When Naomi finally stood to leave, apologizing for taking his time when he probably had important places to be, Minsuk felt an unfamiliar reluctance. You didn't take anything, he said. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. Thank you. Naomi looked confused but smiled anyway, a real smile that reached her exhausted eyes and transformed her whole face. Zara waved enthusiastically. Bye, lonely man. I hope your walls get shorter so you're not so tired. They disappeared into the rain. Minsuk sat there long after they'd gone, staring at the empty cups, feeling something dangerous stirring in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in years. Something like hope, fragile and terrifying. He made a phone call before leaving the café. His head of security answered immediately. Find out everything about the woman and child who just left here. Full background. Discreetly. I don't want them to know they're being investigated. 3 days later, Naomi's phone rang during her lunch break at the daycare. Her supervisor's face was pale. There was an emergency at Zara's school. Naomi's heart stopped. She didn't remember the drive, just running through the school doors to find the nurse with Zara on a cot, her daughter's face twisted in pain she was trying to be brave about. She collapsed during recess, the nurse explained. Severe abdominal pain. We've called an ambulance. The emergency room was chaos. Forms thrust at her. Doctors asking questions she struggled to answer through her panic. They took Zara for tests. Minutes felt like hours. A surgeon finally approached, his expression serious but not unkind. Your daughter has acute appendicitis. It's already ruptured. We need to operate immediately. Naomi signed consent forms with shaking hands, her signature barely legible, her mind screaming prayers to gods she wasn't sure existed. The surgery took 3 hours. 3 hours of pacing the waiting room, making bargains with the universe, promising anything if Zara would just be okay. Finally, the surgeon returned, and Naomi couldn't breathe until he spoke. The surgery was successful. She'll need to stay for observation, but she'll recover fully. The relief nearly buckled Naomi's knees. She was allowed into recovery to see Zara, pale and small against white sheets, but breathing, alive, safe. Naomi held her daughter's hand and cried silently, gratitude overwhelming. Then came the hospital administrator with financial paperwork. The relief turned to ice in Naomi's veins. The numbers were impossible. Even with the minimal insurance she had through the daycare, even with the payment plan they offered, even working every possible hour at all 3 jobs, she couldn't manage this. The bills would bury them. She was drowning, and this time there was no shore in sight. The next 2 weeks were a blur of caring for Zara at home while desperately trying to maintain her jobs. She skipped meals, telling herself she wasn't hungry. She sold what little jewelry she had, pieces that had belonged to her mother. She looked into loans she'd never qualify for, her credit already damaged from previous emergencies. Collection agency notices started arriving. Each one felt like a physical blow. She was working herself to death and still failing her daughter. One evening, as she left her office cleaning job, 2 men in expensive suits approached her in the parking garage. Naomi's first instinct was pure terror. But they were polite, professional, their hands visible and empty. "Ms. Reed? Someone would like to speak with you. It's about your daughter's medical situation." Every instinct screamed danger. But they mentioned Zara's medical bills, and that stopped her. Against every rational thought, she texted a friend her location, kept her phone accessible, and followed them to a black car with tinted windows. The drive took them to one of the most expensive buildings in Hanul City. She'd cleaned offices in buildings like this, invisible labor that people in expensive suits walked past without seeing. She'd never imagined entering one as anything other than that. The elevator rose to the top floor. The doors opened to a penthouse office that screamed power and wealth in every detail. And there, behind a massive desk, sat the man from the café. The lonely man with the tall walls. "Hello, Naomi," Kang Min-suk said, his voice calm but his eyes intense in a way that made her heart race. "I apologize for the dramatic summons. I wasn't sure you'd come if I simply asked." Naomi's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. "How do you know my name? How did you find me? How do you know about Zara's surgery?" "I remembered you," he said simply. "After you left the cafe, I found myself thinking about you and your daughter. I had someone look into your situation. I know that sounds invasive because it is invasive. But I learned about your daughter's emergency, about the medical bills, and I wanted to help." "Nobody helps for free," Naomi said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "What do you want from me?" Min-suk respected that response. He leaned back in his wheelchair, studying her with an intensity that felt like being X-rayed. "I want to offer you a job. Executive assistant. The salary would be substantial. Full medical coverage for you and Zara. Better than anything your current 3 jobs combined could provide." Naomi laughed, but it was bitter, defensive. "I clean offices and serve pancakes. I barely finished community college. What could I possibly do for someone like you?" "You could be honest with me," Min-suk replied. "You could look at me the way your daughter did in that cafe, like I'm just a person. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? Do you know what I would pay for that?" "Your world," Naomi repeated slowly. "What exactly do you do, Mr. Kong?" Min-suk could have lied. Should have lied. Most men in his position would have constructed an elaborate cover story. Instead, he told her the truth, watching her face carefully. "I'm not a good man, Naomi. I control most of the underground trade in this city. Imports, exports, things that don't pass through official channels. I'm the person other criminals fear. I've done things that would horrify you. I've hurt people who threatened what's mine. But I keep my promises. I protect what belongs to me. And I'm offering you a way out of the hell you're living in right now." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. Naomi should have run. Should have called the police, though she suspected they couldn't or wouldn't touch someone like him. Instead, she thought of Zara. Of the medical bills that kept piling up. Of working 3 jobs and still losing ground. Of her daughter's future slipping away because Naomi couldn't earn enough to save it. "I have conditions," she said finally, her voice stronger than she felt. Min-suk nodded slowly. "Name them." "Zara never enters your world. She never meets your associates. She never knows what you really do. If I do this, I protect her from all of it. That's non-negotiable." "Agreed. If I see anything that puts her in danger, I walk away. No matter what you've done for us, no matter what I owe you. Her safety comes first." "Agreed." And you never lie to me. If I'm going to work for you, if I'm going to be part of whatever this is, I need to know what I'm involved in. No surprises that could hurt us later. Min-suk smiled slightly. You drive a hard bargain for someone with no leverage. I'm a mother, Naomi replied. That's all the leverage I need. Deal. He pressed a button on his desk. An assistant entered immediately with papers already prepared, as if Min-suk had known she would accept. The salary listed made Naomi's eyes water. The benefits were better than anything she'd ever imagined existed for people like her. She signed before she could overthink it, before rational fear could override maternal desperation. Naomi's first day in Min-suk's world was an education in controlled violence. The penthouse office was just the public face, the respectable front. The real operations happened in a building across the city, an unassuming warehouse from the outside that contained sophisticated computer systems, armed guards, and men who spoke in coded language about shipments and territories. She was given an office, modest but well-equipped. Her duties seemed straightforward at first. Manage Min-suk's schedule. Handle communications. Organize meetings. But she quickly realized that every phone call had layers of meaning. Every meeting was a negotiation where wrong words could have violent consequences. Every person she met showed her exaggerated respect that had nothing to do with who she was and everything to do with whose name was on her contract. Park Juntae made no attempt to hide his resentment. Min-suk's right-hand man was in his early 30s, ambitious, ruthless in the way of men who'd clawed their way to power and intended to keep climbing. He cornered Naomi in a hallway after her first meeting, his smile not reaching his eyes. You don't belong here, he said bluntly. I don't know what game you're playing with Min-suk, but understand this clearly. He's untouchable because he's feared. You make him look weak, you make all of us vulnerable. And if that happens, you'll disappear so quietly even he won't find you. Do we understand each other? Naomi forced herself to meet his eyes, refusing to show the fear twisting in her stomach. I'm not playing any game. I'm working to support my daughter. That's all. We'll see how long that lasts, Juntae said, walking away. Her real test came during her first major meeting. Min-suk had her sit in on a negotiation with a rival faction. Choi Sung-ho, the leader, was everything Min-suk wasn't. Loud, physically imposing, aggressive in his movements and speech. He walked into the conference room like he owned it, his men flanking him, their hands resting on visible weapons. When he saw Naomi sitting beside Min-suk, his expression twisted into something ugly. This is what you've been reduced to, Kong? Hiding behind women now? You bring your secretary to important meetings like she matters. Min-suk's voice remained perfectly calm, but the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Naomi is here because I want her here. Do you have a problem with my decisions, Choi? I have a problem with you getting soft, Choi shot back. Word on the street is you're not the man you used to be. Maybe the wheelchair finally broke more than your legs. Maybe it's time for new leadership in this city. The silence that followed was dangerous. Min-suk didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You're welcome to try. But understand that if you make a move against me, if you even think about moving against me, it will be the last decision you ever make. I've ended men for far less than disrespect. Choi laughed, but there was nervousness underneath the bravado. Big words for a cripple with a pretty assistant. Test me, Min-suk said quietly. Please. I would enjoy reminding this city why they fear my name. The meeting ended shortly after. Choi left with his men, the threat hanging in the air. Naomi was shaking, trying to hide it. Min-suk noticed immediately. I'm sorry you had to witness that, he said once they were alone. Choi is all bluster. He won't actually move against me. How can you be sure? Naomi asked, her voice not quite steady. Because I know where his children go to school. Where his wife gets her hair done every Thursday. Where his mistress lives in the apartment I could have raided 100 times. And he knows that I know all of it. That's how this world works. Mutual assured destruction. The moment anyone moves, everyone loses something. Naomi felt sick. You would hurt children to make a point? I've never harmed a child in my life, Min-suk replied, and she believed him completely. But I would make absolutely certain he believed I might. There's a difference between being willing to do something and letting people think you're willing. Fear is a more effective weapon than violence. Violence creates enemies. Fear creates compliance. Over the next few weeks, Naomi learned the intricate rhythm of Min-suk's criminal enterprise. She handled scheduling that had to account for police patrol patterns and rival faction movements. She managed communications in code she gradually learned to decipher. She organized meetings where fortunes changed hands and territories were negotiated like corporate mergers. But she also saw glimpses of the man beneath the reputation. Min-suk was generous to his people, paying them far above market rate, ensuring their families had healthcare and education opportunities. He had strict rules. No drugs. No human trafficking. No harming civilians who weren't involved in the underworld. His criminal enterprise existed in gray areas, but he drew hard lines around the darkest ones. She noticed how isolated he was. Juntae and others respected him but didn't care about him. Associates feared him but didn't know him. He existed in a bubble of power that prevented genuine connection. Just like that night in the café, when Zara had seen the truth so clearly through a child's unfiltered perception. One evening, after everyone else had left, Min-suk called Naomi to his office. She found him by the window, staring out at the city lights like he was trying to find something in them he'd lost. Zara's medical bills, he said without preamble, still looking at the city. They've been paid in full. I had my accountant handle it this morning. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. You didn't have to do that. My salary is enough to manage the payment plan eventually. I know, but I wanted to. Consider it a signing bonus that should have been included in your original contract. Tears she'd been holding back for weeks suddenly spilled over. The relief was overwhelming, physical, like a weight lifting from her chest. Min-suk turned his wheelchair, saw her crying, and his expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. Thank you, she managed through the tears. You have no idea what this means. I can't even begin to tell you what this means. I think I do, he replied quietly. My mother struggled to pay for my treatments after my accident. She worked herself to death trying to keep me alive and comfortable. I couldn't help her then. I was just a teenager, useless and angry. But I can help you now. And maybe that balances something in the universe. It was the most personal thing he'd ever shared, a crack in his carefully constructed walls. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. Conversations lasted longer than necessary. Min-suk asked about Zara's recovery, her return to school, the books she was reading. Naomi found herself staying late even when her work was finished, drawn into discussions about everything from philosophy to favorite foods. He had a sharp mind and a dark sense of humor that surprised her. She had a strength and perspective that fascinated him. One evening, Naomi brought Zara to the office because her babysitter had canceled. She'd planned to keep her daughter in her office, but Zara had other ideas. She wandered directly into Min-suk's office, unafraid and curious. You're the lonely man from the café, Zara announced happily. Are your walls shorter now? Min-suk couldn't help but smile. A little shorter. Thanks to your mother. Zara climbed onto his lap without asking permission, examining the controls on his wheelchair with scientific interest. Can you make it go fast? Does it have buttons like a spaceship? Naomi rushed in mortified. Zara, you can't just climb on people. But Min-suk waved her off, something vulnerable and almost happy in his expression. She's fine. I don't mind. He showed Zara the wheelchair controls, let her press buttons to make it move forward and backward. Her delighted laughter filled the office, a sound that hadn't existed there in years, maybe ever. When Naomi finally coaxed Zara away, Min-suk looked shaken in a way that business threats never managed. She's remarkable, he said quietly after Zara left. You've raised someone who sees people, not positions or disabilities or reputations. Just people. That's rare. She sees you clearly, Naomi replied. Maybe we both do now. The almost moment hung between them, heavy with possibility. Then Naomi's phone rang, breaking the spell. But something had shifted irreversibly. Late-night conversations became routine. Min-suk shared more about his past. The accident that had paralyzed him wasn't random. It was a message from a rival faction, targeting his father, a smaller crime boss who'd refused to be absorbed into a larger organization. Min-suk had been 16, caught in crossfire meant to send a message. His father was killed. His legs were shattered. And he'd spent the next 15 years building an empire partially from revenge, partially from necessity, and partially because he didn't know how to be anything else. "I never wanted this life," he admitted one night. "I wanted to study architecture. Design buildings that made people happy. Isn't that absurd? I'm good at strategy and fear, but what I wanted was to create beautiful things." "It's not absurd," Naomi said softly. "It's human. The things we want versus the things we become, those are rarely the same." "What did you want?" he asked. "To be a teacher. To help kids like Zara reach their potential. But life happens, and you make choices, and suddenly you're working 3 jobs and forgetting what you wanted because survival takes everything." "You're still teaching," Min-suk observed. "You're teaching Zara to be brave and kind in a world that punishes both. That's more important than any classroom." The connection between them deepened with each conversation. Looks lasted longer than necessary. Accidental touches sent electricity through both of them. But neither crossed the line. Naomi feared the consequences of mixing professional and personal in this dangerous world. Min-suk feared ruining the one genuine thing he had by pushing too hard, too fast. Then danger crossed the line for them. Naomi noticed the car first. A black sedan that appeared near her apartment building too often to be coincidence. Then Zara mentioned a man asking her questions at school, casual inquiries about her mother's new job. Naomi immediately called Min-suk. His reaction was immediate and comprehensive. Within 2 hours, Naomi and Zara were relocated to a safe house. Armed guards appeared, discreet but present. Min-suk's entire security apparatus mobilized. Park Juntae questioned the response in a private meeting Naomi overheard through a partially open door. "This is excessive for one woman and her kid," Juntae argued. "You're showing weakness. Everyone will see it." "Are you questioning my judgment?" Min-suk's voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm questioning your priorities. Since she arrived, you've been different. Distracted. So, that's going to get us all killed." "Get out," Min-suk said. "Before I forget we've worked together for 8 years." The threat was real. Juntae left, but his resentment was palpable. Min-suk traced the surveillance back to Choi Sung-ho within 24 hours. The rival boss had decided to test Min-suk's vulnerabilities, using Naomi and Zara as pressure points. It was a declaration of war disguised as intimidation. Min-suk's response was surgical and devastating. He didn't attack Choi directly. Instead, he systematically dismantled 3 of Choi's operations in one night. Shipments intercepted. Warehouses raided by authorities who suddenly had detailed anonymous tips. Key associates arrested on outstanding warrants. Choi woke up to find his organization crippled without a single shot fired. The message was clear: touch what's mine, and I'll destroy everything you've built. But Min-suk realized something terrible in the process. Loving Naomi and Zara made them targets. As long as he cared about them, they would be vulnerable. Every enemy he made would see them as his weakness. The only way to truly protect them was to let them go. He called Naomi to his office 3 days after Choi's organization collapsed. "This needs to end," he said without preamble, his voice flat. "I'm releasing you from your contract. Full severance. Your apartment lease is paid for 2 years. Zara's education fund is established. You'll be comfortable." Naomi stared at him, confused and hurt. "What are you talking about? What happened?" "You're in danger because of me. Zara is in danger because I was selfish enough to want you close. I can't protect you if every enemy I have sees you as the way to hurt me. So you're just pushing us away?" Naomi's voice rose. "After everything, you're going to make decisions for me about my safety, about my life? I'm trying to keep you alive." Min-suk's control cracked. "Do you understand what they'll do to get to me? They'll take Zara. They'll hurt her in ways you can't imagine, and they'll make you watch, just to prove they can. I can't live with that. I won't." "Then change," Naomi said fiercely. You have all this power. Use it differently. Build something better. But don't make me leave because you're scared. I'm not scared, Min-suk lied. Yes, you are. Your walls are going back up, taller than ever, and you're trying to convince yourself it's for my protection. But it's for yours. Because caring about us terrifies you more than any rival ever could. The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. Before he could respond, Naomi left, taking his heart with her. 3 days passed. Naomi began packing her apartment, preparing to leave Hanul City entirely. Min-suk buried himself in work, convincing himself he'd made the right choice. Park Juntae seemed satisfied that things were returning to normal. The organization functioned efficiently. And Min-suk was miserable in ways that had nothing to do with loneliness and everything to do with loss. Zara came to his office on the 4th day. She'd somehow convinced the guards to let her through, using the imperious logic only 7-year-olds possess. She marched into his office and climbed directly onto his lap. Mama's crying, Zara announced. She cries at night when she thinks I'm asleep. Are you crying too? No, Min-suk said, but his voice betrayed him. You should tell her you love her, Zara said matter-of-factly. Adults make everything so complicated. If you love someone and they make you happy, you should keep them. That's what I do. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, Zara insisted. Mama said you're scared people will hurt us to hurt you. But bad people will always exist. You can't control everything. But you can choose to be happy anyway. That's what being brave means. Out of the mouths of children came wisdom that shattered years of carefully constructed defense mechanisms. Min-suk made his decision. He called an emergency meeting of every faction leader in Hanul City. The meeting was unprecedented, held in neutral territory, with representatives from organizations that had been enemies for decades. When everyone was assembled, Min-suk made his announcement. I'm restructuring my operations. No more aggressive expansion. No more territory wars. Anyone who touches the woman and child under my protection will face not just me, but a coalition I'm building of every organization tired of endless conflict. We can all profit without constantly fighting. But if anyone tests this, if anyone goes after my family, I will burn this entire city down and rebuild it from ashes. Do we understand each other? It was a gamble. A massive, terrifying gamble. But his reputation and the force of his conviction carried the room. Agreements were made. New alliances formed. The landscape of Hanul City's underworld shifted in one meeting. Min-suk went directly to Naomi's apartment afterward. She answered the door with red-rimmed eyes, clearly shocked to see him. I was an idiot, he said without preamble. I was so busy trying to protect you that I forgot to ask what you wanted. I forgot that you're strong enough to make your own choices, brave enough to face danger if you think something is worth it. So I'm asking now. What do you want? I want you, Naomi said simply. Not your power. Not your protection. Just you. The man who laughed with my daughter in a café. The man who pays for his employees' children's education. The man with walls he's finally willing to lower. They might always come after you to hurt me, Min-suk warned. Then we face them together, Naomi replied. Zara appeared in the doorway, grinning. Are you going to kiss now? In movies, people always kiss when they stop being stupid. They laughed, the tension breaking. Min-suk pulled Naomi close, and they kissed while Zara applauded enthusiastically. 6 months later, the landscape looked different. Min-suk had transitioned much of his operation to legitimate businesses, using his strategic mind and capital to build things instead of just controlling them. The criminal elements remained but were smaller, more selective. He'd made enemies but also unexpected allies. Naomi worked alongside him, not as an assistant but as a true partner. Her insights into people and motivations proved invaluable in negotiations. Zara thrived, attending a better school, making friends, growing up with security she'd never known. Min-suk's penthouse office had changed too. Children's drawings decorated one wall. Zara's laughter echoed through hallways that had only known tension. The man who had ruled through fear learned to lead through respect. The walls he'd built to protect himself came down brick by brick, replaced by something stronger. Family. Trust. Park Juntae eventually left, unable to accept the changes. Some associates followed. Others stayed, relieved to work for an organization that valued stability over aggression. New people joined, attracted by Min-suk's reputation for fairness within his world. On a quiet evening, Min-suk found himself back at the small café where everything had changed. Naomi sat beside him. Zara was drawing at their table, content and safe. He looked at them and realized the power he'd chased for years meant nothing compared to this moment. "You know what I realized?" he said to Naomi. "What?" "I spent 15 years building an empire to prove I was still powerful after the accident. To prove that losing my legs didn't make me weak. But real strength isn't controlling through fear. It's letting people in even when you're terrified they'll hurt you." Naomi squeezed his hand. "Zara was right that first night. You just needed shorter walls. And you both were patient enough to help me tear them down." Zara looked up from her drawing. "I told you adults make things complicated. Love is simple. You just have to be brave enough to choose it." The man who had ruled the shadows finally found light. Not through power or fear or control, but through a woman and child who saw him as simply human. Who demanded he be better, not for them, but for himself. Who taught him that the strongest fortress isn't built from walls, but from trust. And in a city built on secrets and danger, that was the most revolutionary thing of all. If you enjoyed this story of power, redemption, and unexpected love, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional tales that will keep you captivated from start to finish. What did you think of Min-suk's transformation? Could you understand Naomi's choice to stay despite the danger? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these complex characters and their journeys. Share this story with someone who loves deep, romantic dramas with a touch of danger. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.